Dear students, welcome to the third lecture of the series. We are talking about excretory system, and previously we have talked about the fundamental organs of excretory system, a pair of kidneys. Running down from the pair of kidneys are tube-like structures, and we call these tube-like structures as ureters. The ureters then open inside urinary bladder. We talked about these parts in our previous lecture. Now, we are talking about the last part of human excretory system, and that last part of human excretory system is urethra. So let us talk about urethra. Beta, urethra is a tube-like structure that starts from urinary bladder. It's a tube-like structure. And this urethra, it is lined by same kind of wall that lines the ureters, that lines the urinary bladder. Internally, urethra is lined by same kind of epithelium, what we call it as urothelium, or it is actually transitional epithelium. Transitional epithelium. So, we should remember one thing. Urethra is made for the passage of urine towards the exterior. And mammals are the only animals that possess urethra. Urethra is not present anywhere else apart from mammals. So, it is sole property of mammals. Now, so far as urethra is concerned, there is fundamental difference between male urethra and female urethra. There are some fundamental points of difference between male urethra and female urethra. So far as female urethra is concerned, first of all, female urethra is concerned, it is a short tube. So far as male urethra is concerned, it is a long tube. For example, if we consider the bodies of males and females, there are some structural differences between males and females. Let me consider this is female body. This is female body. We have the external most genitalium over here, what we call it as vulva. Let me consider this part is uterus, this part is cervix, and this part is vagina. The female urinary bladder is placed approximately over here, and arising from the urinary bladder is a short, precise urethra, just about 2.5 centimeters long. On the contrary, if I consider this is the body of a male, this is external genitalium, what we call it as penis, this is what we call it as scrotum. We have got testes over here, then epididymis, then vas deferens. The vas deferens enters the body cavity, coils around urinary bladder, and arising from the urinary bladder is a short set-out tube that is called as urethra. The urethra combines with ejaculatory duct, runs all over here, and finally opens to the tip of the penis. So, this is female urethra. As you well see, this is female urethra, the shaded portion, and this is male urethra. You well see there is fundamental difference in the length of the urethra in case of both the sexes. So far as female urethra is concerned, it is approximately 2.5 centimeters long. While as male urethra is approximately about 25 centimeters long. That means almost about tenfold as if we compare male urethra with the female urethra. Besides that, another point of difference is that male urethra is urinogenital. In case of males, the urethra is urinogenital. By urinogenital, we mean urethra conducts both reproductive material towards the exterior as well as the urine. It is connected to the reproductive system, it is connected to the ejaculatory ducts over here. And through the urethra during the course of coitus or sexual act, semen also passes out. While as urethra on the other hand is connected with the urinary bladder, and urethra is the structure that conducts urine towards the exterior. So in case of male is the reproductive passage as well as the urinary passage is one and the same. While as in case of females the urethra is just urinary. It conducts just and just urine. It has nothing to do with the reproductive passage. The opening of urethra is a very short, precise opening just above the vagina. Very short, precise opening. In case of females, the reproductive passage is separate, the urethra is separate. So female urethra is just and just urinary, while as male urethra is urinogenital. Now besides that, the urethra is connected towards the exterior. The opening of the urethra is a short, precise opening, and it is often referred to as urinary meatus. Opening of urethra is often referred to as urinary meatus. Now, because urethra is connected towards the exterior, internally it is lined by transitional epithelium, or what we call it as urothelium. The urethra is loaded by certain antibacterial agents, certain antibacterial chemicals. For example, first of all, urethra is packed with mucus. Number first. Number second, urethra contains certain beneficial bacteria. These beneficial bacteria decrease the pH of the urethra. The interior of the urethra has secretions in it. Secretions like lysozyme, secretions like lactoferrin, substances like defensins, traces of nascent oxygen, traces of ozone, hydrogen peroxide. So all these defense agents are loaded within the interiors of the urethra. If a pathogen happens to enter the urethra, it first of all cannot survive the viscidity of the mucus. Then it has to face the beneficial bacteria. Then it has to face these antibacterial chemicals. So, in case of females, the pathogen has to cross just a short distance of about 2.5 centimeters. Then it is well within the interiors of the body. While as in case of males, the pathogen, if it happens to enter the urinary meatus, it has to face the antibacterial chemicals for a duration of about 25 centimeters. That is the reason any pathogen entering through the urinary meatus into the urethra has to face more hardships in case of males as compared to in case of the body of the females. That is the reason that females are subjected to frequent UTIs, urinary tract infections, as compared to the males. The precise reason is that female urethra is too short, while as male urethra is long. In addition to that, in case of males, the urethra is further subdivided. First of all, the part of urethra that arises from the urinary bladder that conducts just and just urine, that part of urethra is called as urinary urethra. Number second, the part of urethra that is formed by the combination of urethra with ejaculatory duct, it is called as membranous urethra. Number third, another part of urethra is superimposed by prostate gland. It actually passes through the interiors of prostate gland. So that part of urethra which is superimposed by prostate gland is referred to as prostatic urethra. While as the part of the urethra that enters the penis is called as penile urethra. So in case of male is the urethra is divided as urinary urethra, membranous urethra, prostatic urethra and penile urethra. While in case of female is the urethra is short set out tube and it is undivided. It is not divided. Now, this much was about urethra, and finally urethra opens to the exterior through urinary meatus. So we have basically finished with the structural peculiarities of what we call it as excretory system. Now let us talk a little about the blood supply of kidneys. The blood supply of kidneys is very important because urine is to be separated from the blood. Now, we know that each kidney is a bean-shaped structure. It has a convex front, it has a concave front. And present towards the concave front is a depression. That depression is called hilus renalis. Now, a blood vessel arises from the heart, from the dorsal aorta, and this blood vessel enters the kidney. This blood vessel is called a renal artery. So the blood vessel that brings oxygenated blood for the kidney is called a renal artery. Once renal artery enters the kidney, it divides and redivides. It divides into segmental arteries, interlobar arteries, interlobular arteries, arcuate arteries, branches and rebranches. Finally, it forms about 1 million branches. As many branches as many nephrons are present over there. And the final branch that renal artery gives out is called arteriole. So, once renal artery enters the kidney, it branches and rebranches. It first forms segmental arteries, then interlobar arteries, then interlobular arteries, then arcuate arteries, branches and rebranches multiple times, and finally bifurcates into structures called arterioles. Now each arteriole then gives rise to a tuft of capillary. That tuft of capillaries is called as afferent arteriole. The afferent arteriole is further recombined and give rise to another tuft. That tuft is called efferent arteriole. The capillaries of efferent arteriole recombine, then branch and rebranch into fine networks. These fine networks are then called as peritubular capillaries. Peritubular capillaries. The peritubular capillaries can further give longer branches. These longer branches are called vasa recta. The vasa recta peritubular capillaries, on the other hand, recombine to form venules. Venules combine and recombine. Finally, they form a blood vessel. That blood vessel is called a renal vein. And renal vein takes blood out from the kidney. So this much about the vascular supply of the kidney. Beta, the kidney contains about 1 million nephrons, and each and every nephron is going to receive a blood vessel from the main blood vessel of the kidney. That blood vessel is regarded as what we call it as afferent arteriole. So the renal artery, once it enters the kidney, it branches, rebranches, finally gives out about 1 million small branches. These branches are called arterioles. Arterioles further branch out to form a tuft of capillaries called afferent arteriole. Afferent arteriole recombines, then rebranches into another tuft that is called efferent arteriole. Efferent arteriole further recombines, then branches into fine capillary network called peritubular capillaries. The longer capillaries are then called as vasa recta. All of these capillaries on the other side recombine to form venules. The venules combine and recombine in the same fashion in which the renal artery was branched. And finally, a huge blood vessel is formed from the kidney that is called a renal vein. And renal vein takes blood away from the kidney. Now, what is present within the interiors of the kidney that makes the kidney so much special are small tiny tubules about 3 centimeters long, 3 millimeters long. These small tiny tubules are regarded as nephrons. So each kidney contains a fine tubular system, fine network of machines that are destined to perform the process of excretion, and these tubules are regarded as nephrons. Now, so far as nephrons are concerned, first of all, I have told you in my previous lecture that there are about 1 million nephrons present in the kidney at the time of the birth. Besides that, nephrons are epithelial tubules. They are wholly and solely made up of epithelial tissue. In addition to that, we should remember that nephron is a structure which cannot be regenerated. So, if during the course of lifetime a nephron is lost, if during the course of lifetime nephron is lost, it cannot be regenerated. New nephrons cannot be formed. Now, during the course of aging, there is progressive decline in the number of nephrons. I have told you yesterday that by the age of 40 years or from 40 years onwards, there is progressive decline in the number of nephrons. A 40-year-old person has already lost his 10% nephrons. And with the advent of age, with the increase in age, after every 10 years, almost another 10% are lost. But kidney is capable of a phenomenon. That phenomenon is called as compensative regeneration. Compensative regeneration means once a section of nephrons is lost, the remaining nephrons try to overwork in order to compensate for the absence of another nephrons. And it is said that until about 30% nephrons are there inside the kidney, there is no significant effect upon the urinary physiology of a person. So far as these nephrons are concerned, these are epithelial tubules, and inside the kidney we will find first of all two kinds of nephrons. There are two kinds of nephrons present in the kidney. Number first category of nephrons are called as corticoid nephrons. Number second category of nephrons are called as juxtamedullary nephrons. So there are two kinds of nephrons present in the kidney. First category called corticoid nephrons, second category called juxtamedullary nephrons. The basic chunk of nephrons, the main nephrons are actually corticoid nephrons, and corticoid nephrons roughly constitute about 85% of the total nephron count. Corticoid nephrons are comparatively smaller. They are called corticoid nephrons because their principal areas are present in the cortex. Their majority of portion is present in the cortex. Besides that, corticoid nephrons are smaller as compared to the juxtamedullary nephrons. They have smaller loops of Henle. Their loops of Henle are smaller and they project a short distance into the medulla of the kidney. In contrast to corticoid nephrons, juxtamedullary nephrons just constitute about 15% of the total nephron count. These juxtamedullary nephrons are larger if we are going to compare them with corticoid nephrons. The juxtamedullary nephrons, they have long loops of Henle. These loops of Henle project deep inside the interiors of the medulla. And maximum portion of the juxtamedullary nephrons is located in the middle. Besides that, one special difference to be remembered about these nephrons, you can consider corticoid nephrons are those kinds of nephrons which are ever active, that perform their functions always. But juxtamedullary nephrons actually become activated because of the scarcity of water within the body, because of a fall in the water concentration, Ordinarily, juxtamedullary nephrons do not perform much of the urinary function, much of the urinary physiology uh, as compared to the corticoid nephrons. Juxtamedullary nephrons get activated only during the course of scarcity of water, dearth of water within the body. So this much was about the fundamental types of nephrons. Now let us actually now talk about the structure of nephron. Let us talk about the structure of a typical kind of nephron. I have already told you nephrons are epithelial tubules like this. They are coiled epithelial tube-like structures like this. Coiled epithelial tube-like structures. Let me consider this is the rough representation of the nephron. Rough representation of nephron. So let us consider this is the nephron. First of all, each and every nephron has a cup-shaped cavity in the front. This cup-shaped cavity is called as Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule. So each nephron is provided with a cup-shaped structure called a Bowman's capsule. The Bowman's capsule, like other parts of the nephrons, is lined by epithelial tissue. But the epithelial tissue of Bowman's capsule is of different type if we go to compare it with the epithelial tissue of the rest of the nephron. Actually, the Bowman's capsule is lined by simple squamous epithelium. It is lined by simple squamous epithelium. And you should remember the fact from our knowledge about epithelial tissues that simple squamous epithelium is the thinnest of all epithelial tissues, and it is fundamentally present in those areas of the body where there is necessity of diffusion. Now the simple squamous epithelium that lines the cavity of Bowman's capsule is further differentiated into two layers. Number first, we have the interior layer that actually lines the cavity of the cup. This is called a visceral layer. Visceral layer. Then the external lining of the Bowman's capsule is called a parietal layer. So simple squamous epithelium lining the Bowman's capsule is constitutes two layers: the visceral layer within the interior at the periphery, the parietal layer. The parietal layer is ordinary kind of simple squamous epithelium where the cells are closely packed together, arranged like the tiles of floor, and there are no in between spaces inside the parietal layer. So far as visceral layer is concerned, it is spatial. It consists of spatialized simple squamous epithelial cells. These spatialized simple squamous epithelial cells are often referred to as podocytes, or we can call them as pedicel cells. First of all, what is special about the podocyte layer or the visceral layer is that cells are not closely packed together. There always are gaps in between the cells, small perforations in between the cells, and these small perforations are often referred to as filtration slits. These small pores in between the visceral layer of what we call it as visceral layer of Bowman's capsule. This visceral layer is perforated by small gaps, and these small gaps are called as filtration slits. Besides that, each cell of the simple squamous epithelial tissue that lines the visceral layer has feet-like outgrowths. For example, if I consider this is a simple squamous epithelial cell, this simple squamous epithelial cell has projections. That projection is lie towards the cavity of the Bowman's capsule. These projections are called as pedicels. And each pedicel at the tip has a small pore. This small pore is called a papillus. So materials can cross from Bowman's capsule, from the cavity of Bowman's capsule within the lumen of Bowman's capsule, either through the filtration slits, or they can simply cross through the papillae of pedicels and then enter the cell, simple squamous epithelial cell or the podocyte cell that forms the visceral layer. Once again, very first part of nephron is called Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule is lined by simple squamous epithelium. Bowman's capsule is a cup-shaped structure. The wall towards the interior of Bowman's capsule is a spatial wall that is called podocyte layer, or that is called visceral layer. Visceral layer is made up of specialized cells, specialized simple squamous epithelial cells. These specialized simple squamous epithelial cells are called podocytes. Every podocyte is provided with feet-like outgrowths. These are called pedicels. And each pedicel has a pore at the tip that is called papillus. And the podocytes, in contrast to other type of epithelial tissues, they are not closely fitted together. There are intervening gaps in between the podocytes, and these intervening gaps are then called as filtration slits. Then the visceral layer, the parietal layer, lines the periphery of Bowman's capsule. It is ordinary kind of simple squamous epithelium, where the cells are closely packed together. Now, the space between this visceral layer and parietal layer, the space in between them is called as lumen of Bowman's capsule. While the space within the interior of the Bowman's capsule surrounded by visceral layer, it is called as cavity of Bowman's capsule. So Bowman's capsule actually encloses two gaps. First it is cavity within the cup, then the space in between parietal and visceral layer called lumen. Now, this much was about the structure of Bowman's capsule. Now we already know that the renal artery enters the kidney. As it enters the kidney, it gives out about 1 million branches. And each nephron is going to get one branch, one supply from the, what we call it as renal artery. The blood vessel that comes in proximity of the Bowman's capsule from renal artery is finally called as arteriole. Arteriole is a branch coming from the renal artery. The arteriole enters the cavity of Bowman's capsule but immediately divides into a tuft of capillaries. It forms a tuft of capillaries. This tuft of capillaries, this bunch of capillaries is then regarded as afferent arteriole. The capillaries of afferent arteriole then reunite. Once they reunite to form once again the arteriole, they rebranch. After reuniting, they rebranch to form another tuft. This another tuft is then called as efferent arteriole. So, two kinds of bunches are formed from the arteriole actually within the cavity of the Bowman's capsule. Number first is the afferent arteriole, number second is the efferent arteriole. Now, afferent plus efferent arteriole, both are together called as glomerulus. So, the term glomerulus applies to the combination of afferent and efferent arteriole that is present within the cavity of the Bowman's capsule. Then beta, this glomerulus plus Bowman's capsule. The glomerulus along with Bowman's capsule means this whole structure. This structure is then called as renal corpuscle. We call this structure as renal corpuscle, or we can also call it as Malpighian body. Malpighian body. So there are about 1 million Malpighian bodies present in the kidney. Now, once the efferent arterial capillaries rejoin, they once again form the arteriole. This arteriole then gives rise to fine network of blood vessels, fine network of capillaries all around the nephron. This fine network of capillaries, these capillaries are often referred as peritubular capillaries. While as the longer ones that run parallel to the loop of Henle, these are regarded as vasa recta. So efferent arteriole gives rise to efferent arteriole, and efferent arteriole recombines to form the arteriole. The arteriole then gives out a fine network of smaller branches called peritubular capillaries that cover whole of the nephron. Then some longer branches that run parallel to the loop of Henle, these are called vasa recta. On the other front, peritubular capillaries and vasa recta then finally recombine to form venule. And all the venules will recombine to form renal vein that will carry blood away from the kidney. So this much was about the first part of the nephron that we called as Bowman's capsule, and we also talked about glomerulus. Glomerulus plus Bowman's capsule, they are together regarded as renal corpuscle. Now, let us talk about the second part of the nephron. We should remember the fact that whole of the nephron is actually an epithelial tube. Is a small epithelial tubule. Now, once again, if I consider this is Bowman's capsule, arising from the Bowman's capsule is actually a coiled portion of the nephron. This coiled portion of the nephron is simply regarded as proximal convoluted tubule. Proximal because it is present in the proximal and anterior end of the nephron. Convoluted because it is highly coiled, and tubule because it is a very small tube. This proximal convoluted tubule, it is basically lined by simple cuboidal epithelium. Its lining is composed of simple cuboidal epithelium. So the lining of proximal convoluted tubule, it is composed of simple cuboidal epithelium. But the simple cuboidal epithelial cells that line the proximal convoluted tubule possess microvilli. And we know the fact that microvilli are present at those spots within the body where there is necessity of absorption or reabsorption. The microvilli present in the proximal convoluted tubule are present in brush border fashion. They are present in the brush border fashion. Now, proximal convoluted tubule is the chief site of reabsorption inside the nephron. Here, materials are reabsorbed to the extent of about 75 to 90%. Most of the materials are actually reabsorbed in the proximal convoluted tubule. Some of the materials are completely reabsorbed over here. We will see in the physiology of excretion. So the chief site of reabsorption is proximal convoluted tubule. Now, arising from proximal convoluted tubule is another part of the nephron. This part of the nephron, it is a U-shaped structure. It is a U-shaped structure, and this U-shaped structure is finally called as loop of Henle. This is called as loop of Henle. This U-shaped part of the nephron, this U-shaped part of the nephron, it is called as loop of Henle. Now, loop of Henle, first of all, this part is meant for the concentration of the urine. By concentration of urine, we mean loop of Henle is meant to concentrate the urine. Those animals whose urine is very much dilute, they lack loop of Henle or even possess a small loop of Henle. For example, if you see in case of fishes and amphibia, the loop of Henle is insignificant. While those animals whose urine is hypertonic, like birds and reptiles, they possess a very long loop of Henle. So loop of Henle is actually meant for the concentration of urine. Once again, the loop of Henle is an epithelial tubule as usual lined by epithelial tissue. It is divided into two limbs. One of the limbs going vertically downwards, and this limb is called as descending limb. Another limb going vertically upwards, and this limb is called as ascending limb. Now each limb is further divided into two parts. The first part of the descending limb is comparatively thick. It has a wide lumen, while as the later part is comparatively thin. It has a narrow lumen. So the first part is accordingly called as thick segment, while as the later part is then called as thin segment. Now, thick segment constitutes about 4/5 of the loop of Henle, while as thin segment constitutes just about 1/5. In addition to that, the first part of ascending limb is thin segment, the later part of ascending limb is thick segment. Now, loop of Henle, it is capable of reabsorbing water as well as mineral ions. Actually, the descending limb is capable of reabsorbing water. Descending limb is capable of reabsorbing water. Ascending limb is capable of reabsorbing mineral ions. And we should remember the fact that juxtamedullary nephrons have longer loops of Henle as compared to the loops of Henle of corticoid nephrons. Now, another part of the nephron, let us talk about another part of the nephron. It is the posterior most part of the nephron. It is called as distal convoluted tubule. Once again, if I consider this is the Bowman's capsule. Let me consider this is PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. This is LH. Let me consider loop of Henle. Now, loop of Henle gives rise to another coiled part of the nephron. This coiled part of the nephron, it is called as distal convoluted tubule, in short designated by DCT. Now, distal convoluted tubule is actually made up of the same set of which the proximal convoluted tubule is made. So, predominant kind of epithelial tissue present in the distal convoluted tubule is cuboidal epithelium, provided with microvilli. Now, distal convoluted tubule is capable of reabsorbing water. It is also capable of reabsorbing mineral ions. It can reabsorb water, it can reabsorb mineral ions. But ordinarily, distal convoluted tubule reabsorbs nothing. Its activity is dependent upon the hormones. It reabsorbs water in presence of hormone, what we call it as in presence of hormone, antidiuretic hormone. Vasopressin, actually coming from the what we call it as hypothalamus, then being released from posterior pituitary. While as mineral ions are reabsorbed from distal convoluted tubule in presence of hormone aldosterone. That aldosterone hormone is a mineralocorticoid. It comes from the cortex of the adrenal gland. Then distal convoluted tubule finally opens into a duct. This duct is called as collecting duct. Both collecting ducts as well as DCTs, these are located in the DCT is located in the cortex, collecting duct is located in the medulla. About 20 to 30 distal convoluted tubules combine together and open into a common collecting duct. The collecting duct runs parallel to the loop of Henle. And we should also remember vasa recta also run parallel to these structures. We will be talking about them later on. Now, collecting duct is also capable of reabsorption. It is capable of reabsorbing mineral ions as well as water. The collecting duct is about 10 to 15 collecting ducts together reopen into another duct. That duct is called as duct of Bellini. So, inside the kidney, the distal convoluted tubules combine to form collecting ducts. Collecting ducts recombine to form ducts of Bellini. Ducts of Bellini then open into structures called renal pyramids. Renal pyramid is then open papillus into minor calyx. Minor calyx then opens into major calyx, and major calyx finally opens inside the renal pelvis, from where urine is conducted to the urinary bladder through ureters. Distal convoluted tubules 20 to 30 opening into collecting ducts, 10 to 15 collecting ducts opening into ducts of Bellini, ducts of Bellini opening into renal pyramids, renal pyramids opening into minor calyx, minor calyx opening into major calyx, major calyx into renal pelvis, and from renal pelvis the urine is conducted forwards by means of ureters. There's a lot more to come in this series. We have to talk about the sensory supports located in the nephrons. We have to talk about juxtaglomerular apparatus. We have to talk about macula densa. We have to talk about vasa recta. We have to talk about peritubular capillaries. We have to talk about the physiology of urine formation. And all that will be dealt in successive lectures. Till then, take care.